Dashcam was released theatrically on the 3rd of June, directed and written by Rob Savage. It stars Annie Hardy, most known as a songwriter, and Amar Chandra Patel. In it, Anna plays a fictionalized version of herself taking a road trip to London. She steals a friend's car, and while performing an Uber Eats order, is offered a large sum of money to courier an old woman. Then strange things start to occur. The entire thing is found footage, shot either with the titular dash cam or phone cameras during a live stream. Much of the film centers on Hardy's performance as an abrasive right-wing American who has no concern for others around her. In the end, there's no real redemption for her, as events happen and she has to react as opposed to making a choice. A viewer's experience will depend entirely on how much they can stomach the level of unlikability in a character they're supposed to root for. There are some supernatural elements that are introduced later in the film that are ill-defined and in the end have no explanation. For example, it turns out the old woman she is driving is actually only 16 and was transformed, but it has no effect on the plot, and even as a misdirection, it doesn't work. There are other coincidences that don't pass a logic test, and ultimately it's hard to sit with a character like Annie for the whole film and to root for her. This is not recommended. Mid-Century came out on June 17th and was directed by Sonja O'Harris and written by Mike Stern. It stars Chelsea Gilligan, Stephen Lang, and Shane West. A couple moves into a new mid-century house, but it turns out there are spooky goings-on, and the original architect may have been into occult practices. If the plot sounds similar, that's because it is. This is the same film as so many others, down to the same scares. The themes that it plays with are how traditional gender roles are still enforced, and sexism exists. While these are both fine things to make a film about, they are dealt with a bludgeoning manner, and forgotten about towards the end of the film, as it moves more into spooky ghost territory. While there are a few things that set it apart from similar tales, notably the house itself, it's just unsatisfying, and one more fish in a swarm of thousands. Abandoned, on the same day, suffers much the same fate. Directed by Spencer Squire and written by Eric Patterson, it stars Emma Roberts, John Gallagher Jr., and Michael Shannon. A couple move into an old house, but there are some strange sounds, and it seems like terrible events from the past are affecting the present. It's déjà vu, all over again. With the typical premise, the question is always, what sets it apart? With this film, the answer is the acting, which is very solid from the primary cast members. Unfortunately, that's about the only thing. The script is mediocre, the plot wafer thin, and the scares are brief, with only a few truly effective ones. Where it really falls apart, though, is the ending, which only adds confusion, giving no catharsis or even explanation. Then there's the elephant in the room, the baby of the main couple. For approximately 30% of the runtime, it's crying, and while this does add to the stress the main character feels, and helps the atmosphere, it hurts the viewing experience tremendously. At least it's cute when it's not screaming. There are some very relevant themes that it tries to bring in, postpartum depression, although in this case it's psychosis, and it's relatively effective when representing this, but again it doesn't make for good entertainment. Even though it's so stock standard, there are some decent ideas, and with another draft of the script and a changed ending, it could be something decent. As released, however, it's an unpleasant affair that offers nothing new. He's Watching, released 4 days later, is a found-footage horror film directed and written by Jacob Estes and starring his 2 kids, Serena and Lucas. The pair's parents have been struck with a mysterious illness, and they're recording various vlogs to keep them updated. Strange things happen during the night, and a mysterious figure keeps sending them videos that seem impossible. The design of the villain is great, with a suitably creepy mask and a presence that can't be ignored. Similarly, the videos he takes are disturbing for much of the first act. Unfortunately, the found footage element of the film seems to be forgotten at that point, and while it maintains the quality, it becomes a traditional film much of the time, bouncing back and forth between angles that would be impossible. While there is a supernatural threat, it doesn't explain much of the strange filming style. The actual mystery itself works well, and the kid actors are fairly solid, but it's hard to get over ignoring the conventions of the genre with no purpose. There's also the plague, a metaphor for COVID. In this case, it only affects adults, and is lethal to a huge degree, killing off all of their neighbors. Despite this, no other kids are even seen. Not even in the background. This is obviously due to the limits of the filmmaking, but it feels like a big missed opportunity, and when it's mysteriously resolved at the end, it feels cheap. While there's certainly good points, with a few scary sequences and a decent concept, these 2 glaring issues put too much of a damper on the rest of the film to recommend. Nope premiered on July 22nd. It was written and directed by Jordan Peele and stars Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer. The pair are trying to keep the family ranch going after the sudden death of their father, when suddenly a strange cloud appears overhead, and it may be alien in origin. At the same time, Ricky, who has been buying off their horses, organizes a huge concert in an effort to lure out the creature. This was one of the biggest releases of the year, and offers a unique look at fame, fortune, and the costs of a Hollywood life. Peele has become one of the most renowned directors in recent years, and for good reason. An incredibly solid script, amazing effects, and believable characters all contribute to an amazing third effort. There's no part that lets down the film, and the conclusion, while inevitable, avoids an action-packed finale for a more tense, body horror-filled exploration. There's a solid amount of comedy as well, with some obvious jokes, but other subtler, darker moments. It's just a generally great film, and with so many individual moments to talk about and dissect, and thematic elements that could be discussed for hours. Likely you've already seen it, but this is one of the better films of the year, and is recommended. Allegoria was released on the 2nd of August on Shudder, and is an anthology horror film directed by Spider-One, a younger sibling of Rob Zombie. It's much better than his effort for the year, and stars an ensemble cast. It's a heavy metal-inspired collection of interconnected shorts, taking inspiration from Southbound and the like. As with almost all collections, it's inconsistent. It starts off strong, with an amazing performance by John Enos as an acting coach, and then there is a paint monster, a date gone wrong, and the true power of music. The effects are the standout, with some solid makeup work, and almost entirely practical. It's also a tidy 70 minutes, and though a few segments outstay their welcome, they're generally over before they become boring. There are few duplicated moments, seeing one character's perspective and then others, which feel repetitive, but this only happens a couple times. In the end, it doesn't do anything that unusual or new, but the individual segments can be fairly fun, and the acting's solid. The sequences have ties within universe, but also are all about the struggles of making art, and it's quite resonant. Especially with the length, this is an easy recommend. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies came out on August 5th, and was directed by Helena Regine, and written by Sarah Delop. It stars Maria Baklava and Amandla Stenberg. They are a couple and head to a hurricane party with a bunch of other rich 20-somethings. Things begin to grow heated during a mafia-inspired game, and people begin to really die. The film is a comedy horror rather than a horror comedy, especially during the first act, but it embraces the paranoia and fear during the latter half. It's a very funny send-up of Gen Z culture, with all the expected references to being cancelled, gaslighting, and being toxic. There's a sort of loving reverence that escalates it above something like Texas Chainsaw 2022, however, as you have to appreciate something to parody it effectively. The final reveal of the killer is hysterical, and there's so many good moments where the vapid nature of the characters are put on full, glorious display. Special attention has to be called to Rachel Sennott as well, who reacts like she was struck on learning that someone hate listens to her podcast. The directing is solid, and because the power goes out during the second act of the film, it's almost in complete darkness. The actors have to create their own light, offering something fairly unique. This allows for some creepy moments, and stalking around the house with only a phone camera, and the pounding weather outside, makes for some effective scares. The script is smartly written as well, not breaking up the tension with jokes, but having separated moments for humor and horror. It's 2 thumbs up. During this third week, the film that I most enjoyed was Bodies, 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 although the best film is Nope. The worst was Abandoned, though it was tied with Mid-Century. I hope you've had a good week.